Hello and welcome. As you can tell, it's going to be jovial and happy and fun and all of that stuff. Welcome to tonight's event of the 2012 Sagan National Colloquium. As you may know, this year's colloquium is titled Bite, examining the mutually transformative relationship between people and food. And the series continues until November 14th. So please check the schedule. We've got great events happening all the way up until that point. I did want to introduce our moderator for tonight. Our moderator is Tricia Wheeler. Tricia is the publisher and editor-in-chief of Edible Columbus magazine, which is an independently owned, community-based publication devoted to connecting its readers with the local food community. So please welcome me in joining Tricia Wheeler to the microphone for tonight's event.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I have a soft voice, so. Okay, I'm so happy to be here tonight. Thank you to Ohio Wesleyan and Chris Fink for having the foresight to put together such a wonderful colloquium. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Jenny Britton Bauer. Jenny is the proprietress of Jenny's Ice Cream, James Beard winning cookbook author, and the artist behind what I would argue is the best ice cream being produced in our country. I'm going to introduce to you next Ben Sipple. He's an Ohio boy who attended and graduated from his father's alma mater, Ohio Wesleyan. Ben came to a career in agriculture after working on farms during college to fulfill a graduation requirement for his environmental and geography major. Today, Ben works at the Sipple family farm with his wife Lisa and their 2 children. The 77-acre farm they own in Morrow County provides community-supported agricultural shares for 150 families and crops to sell at local farmers markets. In 2009, they began to build the first sheep dairy and farmstead creamery in Ohio. The creamery is now producing award-winning cheeses. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Warren. He describes himself as a dairy nerd. After a career consulting in all aspects of the dairy business, from processing to distribution, marketing, and consumption, Warren is now on his second act. In 2007, he started Snowville Creamery. Here, he bottles his neighbors' locally, sustainably raised, grass-fed dairy cow's milk. Warren started by supplying milk to his Athens neighbors. Now he supplies many of us our milk. You can find Snowville in Whole Foods across the state, in many grocery stores, and in Washington, D.C. Warren is also passionate about changing the way our current government policies are written. He's an advocate for pushing America toward the sustainable production of food for all. Warren, I know you've invested so much of yourself in Snowville. Can you take us back and tell us why you decided to start a creamery?
I think that, you know, for me, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. And it's hard to explain to some of the younger people in this room the world that I grew up in, because we were eternally optimistic and we intended to bring everyone into the same prosperity and happiness that we enjoyed in this country. In 1968, I was working in a TB hospital in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Wasn't everybody?
Long dramatic pause.
I think that, you know, the 40 years since then have been for those of us who were there then, who participated in the civil rights movement, who participated in the anti-war movement, who participated in the environmental movement. You know, those of us who are of this age, we look back and, in fact, we're horrified at what we see. For me, I grew up in a family where milk was revered. My father ran the National Dairy Products Judging Contest, I know you've never heard of it, for 20 years, because he had the ability with his tongue in his mouth to discern good milk from bad milk and really good milk from mediocre milk or even good milk. Do you know why you close your eyes when you kiss?
Why?
because there's a lot going on. And we need to learn to close our eyes when we eat our food, which we can't do if we're driving an automobile. Or watching television. And when we get to the point in this nation where we kiss while we're driving automobiles and watching television, God help us all.
Fantastic.
So I think that the connection with food is something so primal and so basic. I believe that until we reach puberty and we get to know the touch of another person, the most comforting thing that we can have is a glass of milk that reminds us of where we came from and where we started and what was so extraordinary to us. And I think that we've robbed the last 3 generations in this country of that experience, because when I stand in a Whole Foods store in Washington, D.C., and I'm absolutely in the minority as being a white person, people come up to me and the tears run down their face when they taste our milk, and they say, I haven't tasted milk like this since I left home. I didn't know there was such a thing as bad milk until I came to America. I built a creamery because I was so mad with what American capitalism and agriculture had done to a food so important, so sacred, so universal. We are all here because of milk. I want to make you at least a little bit mad tonight, because we've got a whole bunch of work to do. I built a creamery to prove that we were on the wrong course. How many people here think that we're on the right course? So your problem is you wonder what to do. You can't build a creamery. You know, that was my privilege, but then I'm 60 and you're not. So what can you do? I'm not here to tell you, but I'm here to tell you that you're here at this institution and you're here at this talk tonight to figure it out. And if you can't get excited enough to go to Port-au-Prince and work in a TB hospital, or work in the civil rights movement, or work in the anti-war movement, find something to do that you have a passion for that matters, because otherwise your time here will be wasted. And you've got a lot more of it than I do. So for me, I grew up on Olentangy River Road, straight down 315, not too far from here. And when my father got out of Dairy Tech School in 1953, he ran Deer Lick Dairy that was right here across from Bud's right here in Delaware. My earliest childhood memories are right here in this very town. So you folks may imagine what a striking thing it is for me to come here. What do I have to say to you? What do I want you to take away from here? That food is sacred. It's been sacred for all of humanity. And we're living at a moment in time when it's not. This moment too will pass. You know the king that wanted a new truth-sayer? He brought them in and he interviewed them. And he said, I want you to tell me something that will always be true. Finally, one of them said, this too will pass.
Thanks, Warren.
So get ready for the future where it passes.
See why I love my panel? Michael Jones is the Executive Director of Local Matters and the owner of the Greener Grocer, located in Columbus at also the historic North Market. Michael graduated from Chapel Hill with a degree in public health and studied to be a chef at the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park. Michael has been a passionate advocate for strengthening our local food system and for providing equal access for all community members to local, affordable, and healthy foods. This is a good point to ask Jenny and Warren. You need each other. Both of your businesses have thrived in part because of your relationship to one another. Jenny, can you describe for the audience the relationship between Jenny's Ice Cream and Snowville? And then Warren, can you describe what this partnership has meant to your creamery?
We're married. I actually do describe it that way a lot. I mean, I think our companies are married, and Warren and I are too. In somewhere.
Yes. Oh, it's fine.
When I started making ice cream in 1996, I thought it would be really easy to source local milk, or just really good milk. I mean, it's Ohio. We're a top 5 dairy state. I had heard that, at Ohio State where I was. And I mean, I thought we could just go up to any dairy, and I was 22, so I didn't know very much about ice cream or about dairy. I thought you could just walk up to a dairy. I drove by them all the time on my way anywhere in Ohio, and there's all those grass pastured cows and quaint farms, and I thought I could just walk up and knock on their door, basically, and just, I'm going to make ice cream out of out of the milk. That is so far from actually what's the truth of the dairy system. Not only can you not do that, you can't get single farmed or single sourced dairy, and especially at the time, you couldn't even make ice cream. So I started from then just going through every door, finding anyone who talked to me about dairy, who knew a dairy farmer, who knew anyone in the dairy business. I called them. I went and visited them for years until we did finally find an organic dairy in Utica that we started working with family that were only sourcing from family farms, organic dairy farms. They went out of business, then somebody else came in and took them over, and meanwhile, when they go out of business, we're going to Kentucky to find dairy because for whatever reason we couldn't get just Ohio dairy. I mean, it was weird, or that quality that I was looking for. The new one comes in, then they go out of business. Meanwhile, I hear about Warren Taylor, and it's just another door that I'm going through. I was at Ohio State talking about dairy, using cultures to thicken dairy products or whatever. He's like, you should talk to this crazy guy down in Athens named Warren Taylor. So we did. So I don't know, when I was 2000, must have been, it was 2007 because I was pregnant with Greta. Very, very, very pregnant with Greta, like 10 months pregnant. I went down there and Warren's feeding me raw milk. And so we were talking about these dairy cultures because we were really excited. I had this idea that we would thicken ice cream with the, by sort of culturing the dairy or whatever. And so he's like, oh, yeah, I got to show you this. And he pulled out, in a non-air conditioned room, these big ball jars on the top of his refrigerator. He's like, you got to try this. And it was like gel, like white gel. And I didn't know how long they'd been up there or whatever. And he's like eating it, he's like, it's completely flavorless. It's awesome. And we could do so much with this. He'd already been working on this whole thing and everything. And I was really excited about it, but I did not want to eat it. But of course it's Warren. And he's like, whatever. So of course I'm like, yeah, it's great. But
it was fresh from the day before, I assure you.
All dairies are in this sort of same situation. I don't know. 50 years ago, 30 years ago, during the last century, there were 8,000 dairies in the United States. Each one of them made ice cream because they had milk. As soon as they started putting skim milk out on the market and 2% milk, they had extra cream left over. And so even in Columbus and in every single market, you could find several different local ice creams. Now, I mean, they weren't really good ice creams. When they would run out of dairy fat, maybe they'd substitute vegetable fat and, whatever. But still, everyone had to make ice cream because they had all this cream left over. And so I thought, well, Warren's got to have some of this cream left over. What's he doing with it? And so anyway, that's how we got connected. Now Warren and down at the creamery, they have a batch pasteurizer that's just for our ice cream, and it actually, we add the sugar right there and cook the ice cream right on the farm. We start with raw milk, and we have this great, and Warren's a very innovative person, so it's been awesome how we've achieved this beautiful ice cream that is unlike any other ice cream because of this amazing partnership that we have, not just in flavor, but also Warren just being such a smart guy.
That's good. That was good, Jenny.
I love that Jenny describes it as a marriage, because I think that this is really where our food comes from. You know, you think about the connectedness that's required for a community to grow, share food and all. You know, I have to confess that Jenny completely charmed me the first time we met immediately, because I recognized someone who was so interested in the food, in the experience of the food. And I don't get to meet a lot of people like that necessarily. And
let me add, Warren did not want to work with us, by the way, either. Like, ice cream was so far away from what he wanted to do. He's all about health and creating healthy milk. And I wouldn't say that we're not. I think ice cream is a health food, okay? Mental health, maybe, whatever. But no, I won't go there. I won't even say it. But yeah, that was just so not interesting. So I really had to work that. So charming, yeah.
That's good, Jenny, because I have to say, I first heard about Jenny and I just thought, oh, another person making some kind of goofy ice creams, you know. To me, ice creams are best, you know, there's only one ice cream, and that's just the cream and the sweetener. You know, you can call it vanilla, but you don't really have to put vanilla in it if you got good dairy ingredients. It's frozen cream. But I didn't know any part of it until I met Jenny, and right away I knew I was having the privilege of sharing space with an extraordinary person who shared the passion. You know, I think you know that the word passion is tough. You know, I think of Lucinda Williams, who I just saw a few weeks ago down at Nelsonville Music Festival. You know, passionate kisses. You know. I need a rock and roll band and passionate kisses. And so I think that we look around, and passion is what we all want. Passion is connected closely with another P word, which is purpose. You know, I wasn't too interested in ice cream because there was no good milk and I was so focused on milk. But Jenny turned me around in a heartbeat. And the privilege of working with her for the organization, for the group that she's put together doing what she's doing is just extraordinary. I'd never imagined a partnership in thinking about doing the creamery, which I did for years, and in the end it was the ultimate gamble of being risking everything I had in the world to start a creamery. But never having thought about ice cream, having Jenny appear out of nowhere was wonderful. My father taught me to make ice cream, hand ice cream, when I was about 8 years old, and it was a family ritual. And I left Ohio when I graduated college and moved out to the San Francisco Bay Area. I made ice cream every weekend on my porch out there with whatever fresh fruit was cheap at the supermarket and overripe. You know, ice cream was something that was very near and dear to me that I had lost track of over the last few decades. And Jenny reintroduced me to it. And I think this is a profound comment about what we need to do. You know, we have this American independence. I'm afraid that part of the news of the future in terms of local food is you have to give yourself over. I don't want to say to communism, but to your community. And so Jenny gave me a great gift in reawakening something that I had forgotten, and allowing me late in my life to refocus on something that was really precious and special to me. And I think this is so much what food is about. I think there's more stories for all of us in food than in anything else. And this is the way that cultures, this is the way that intimacy, this is the way that love and care has been passed on to everyone. A child dies or a grandmother dies, and what do? You take someone food. What are you really doing? How many chances do you get to do this today? What do? Go somewhere and get, go to Whole Foods and get some prepared food and take it to them? It's the making of the food that makes it what it is. partnering with Jenny is something that is a privilege because she brings this care to everything she does. I think this is the message that we all have to realize here about everything we do. Anything, but most especially food.
I love it when you do that. So Warren and I have this thing, like it's almost like the taste great, less filling. So Warren, grass-pastured milk and cream has a lot more have CLAs, DHAs, all these great nutrients that you don't get in milk that's conventional milk. And so when we can stand in the grocery store together, it's really fun because all of those things have flavor. And that's why I want to buy that milk, because if we're going to make the best ice cream that ever existed in the history of mankind, then we have to start, and which we don't do right now. We're going to be doing this. I mean, we're going to get better every single day. Or maybe we don't, but anyway, we're going to get better every single day. But we have to start with this beautiful ingredients, and you have to know the people who are growing these things. And of course, if you're an ice cream maker, it all has to start with grass.
And I think you guys both describe just a perfect relationship as it relates to local food, and that we need each other, and that we need to build relationships, and we need to build contacts, and we need to talk to each other and learn from each other and see how we can bring people along. And I think Jenny's done a great job of that, of spotlighting other artisans and other farms and being able to help elevate what they're doing also. I think there's amazing things happening down in Athens when we're on this topic of what are opportunities, and what has an area that had some economic difficulties been able to achieve around food. And so can you tell us a little bit about your backyard, from Kip's High Tunnels to Pawpaws to Au Chocolat to all the businesses that have been able to grow down in the southern part of our state, and a little bit about how that's all happened?
You bet. Thanks, Tricia, because we're getting some recognition. People tell me how wonderful Snowville is, and I try to explain that we're really a product of the community that we were relatively late arrivals in. You know, I showed up there 18 years ago, and there was a thriving community, a thriving food community. And if you go back 100 years, there were more intentional communities in the Athens area than anywhere in the world. I don't know if it's something in the water or what it is down there. There's also, where I live out in the country, I could shoot arrows between the Indian mounds that are down there. And this is the place where people live densely in communities going back how many thousands of years. So I don't know what it is, Tricia, but there's something going on down there in Athens. And it started with a farm market about 35 years ago, I think it's been. And Kip and Becky are a glorious example. They've been a couple of decades now back in Athens. They've got a dozen high tunnels where they grow 300 to 500 pounds of produce every week in the winter with no supplemental heating. They've been doing it for a decade. They've been putting on more people. They've been putting on more tunnels. And all they want to do right now is teach what they know. And if you ever want a good thing to do, wake up on Saturday morning about 7 o'clock, jump in your car and come to Athens and be there when the bell rings at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's one of the most extraordinary farm markets in all of America. And it's just a little sliver, just peeking through a keyhole down upon your knees into what is a much larger, whole integrated community. When my wife Victoria and I started the creamery, we knew that if it failed, we would have nothing. Think about that. 60 years old and nothing. I mean, nothing. How could we do this? We did it because we knew we were in a community where we would never want for anything, because we were living in the glow of our loving friends who would never let us go without a meal or a roof over our heads. And it gave us the freedom to take that leap. We support each other down there in every way. We're close-knit, we're geographically close, geographically close, and we're all committed to each other. And now, we're talking, we need a semi-truck. Our Snowville Creamery truck got busted going across the scales between Cincinnati and Columbus last night. We weren't overweight, but we were unbalanced on 2 of the axles. We need a bigger truck. So this is the dilemma we are in. In Athens, we have dozens of individual entrepreneurs who have been encouraged and emboldened by the other people in their community and by the support structure that is there to go ahead and take the leap and do great things. And is that a good answer, Trish?
That's a good question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have 2 questions for Warren Taylor. Number 1, I think you're pretty passionate about milk. And I just wondered, do you like whole milk, skim milk, 2%? Just curiosity.
Do you believe in God?
I'm guessing that's whole milk.
Yes.
I have another question for you. This is a serious one. You mentioned before that milk is something about the milk is we wouldn't be here without milk. I think is what you said. And what do you say to the vegans in the room for that?
Well, I think this whole thing about milk. I think the first thing to understand is, let's get to the facts. I'm an engineer. I'm a scientist type. More people in traditional diets consume milk than consume rice. More people in traditional diets consume milk than consume wheat. So let's start by understanding that milk is statistically the most ubiquitous, the most common single food in the human diet in the world. So before we have any discussions about, whatever's right or wrong, let's get that fact out right away. Secondly, all this talk about lactose intolerance is a relatively new phenomena where we're drinking sweet, fresh, cold milk. Traditionally, people took milk out of the cow and it's soured. It's soured because microorganisms were consuming the lactose and turning it into lactic acid. And in doing that, it lowered the pH or raised the acidity of the milk to below pH 4.2, which is about where disease-causing organisms can grow. So the history of milk is the history of a very wonderful coincidence that in its natural situation, it ferments. It ferments, and in fermenting, it actually removes the lactose and it makes it unavailable for disease-causing organisms to grow in it. This is the history of milk. The last 50 years is simply a blip. So I would say that I believe that Homo sapiens developed because, for the first time in human history, we had milk for our children, for our adolescents, for our young mothers, for our men going out and working or hunting, for our older people, when we lived in communities. And every community, in every society where there were lactating mammals, consumed milk, every single one, because it was the first time in human history that we could have protein without chasing something down and killing it. And I believe that Homo sapiens only exist because of milk. Our brain size, our stature, our longevity is the result of milk. So you have to understand that you're not dealing with someone who looks at this thing the way most people do. So secondly, I appreciate the vegan perspective. I was a vegetarian when I was a young hippie in my 20s. I went to San Francisco, I started doing Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and the Chinese I was studying under, we would take them to lunch in Chinatown, and they would order for you based on what you needed to eat. Kidneys, lungs, brains, tendons. And if you said, oh, sorry, master, I'm a vegan or a vegetarian, he wouldn't have understood any more than when he showed you how to punch or stand, you did it some different way. So I was saved from vegetarian by my interest in pursuing Kung Fu, doing Tai Chi. But I find a parallel, I think, and I hope I don't offend anybody here because I don't mean to, but I think everything we're talking about here tonight is about consciousness. Everything is about consciousness. And I remember being absolutely abhorrent in the 1980s when every PhD woman studies program in the world taught as catechism that men and women were really the same. And that if you gave girls trucks and boys dresses, you know, you wouldn't know the difference. Anybody who's raised animals, dogs, chickens, cows, you know that men and women are very different. And it's bullshit that they're the same.
Do we have time for another?
And so I believe that there's a problem between people thinking what intellectually they think the world should be as compared to people observing the world and seeing what it is. Is that a fair answer?
I'll just say that sheep were actually the primary dairy animal before cows in Europe, and they only lost that status during the time of the bubonic plagues because of a labor shortage.
Thank you, Ben.
That's good hysterical.
See, we have
hysterical.
Yeah.
we have so much knowledge up here. Okay, go ahead. The gentleman who's at the mic.
Hi there. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of big ideas today, and I think that's great, but to me, I'd like to kind of get at something that's a little more practical. And so I guess my question is, for all of you, and I hope that each of you will answer, what can I personally do tomorrow, or the next day, or next week? What can I personally do, what can we all personally do over the next few weeks?
That's perfect. You just said my closing line. Okay. You want to start, Jenny?
I had a flu last week, so I was in bed for 2 days, and one thing I did was watch TED Talks all day long, which was awesome. So there are a ton of really inspiring, really great TED Talks that will get you off a chair when it comes to the whole food system and a lot of these things. And it's great, and they're very, very specific. So everyone from Mark Bittman, Jamie Oliver has a great one, Dan Barber, who's a famous chef, of course, Michael Pollan, and on, but just type that in and go. There's lots of books. I'd like to hear what everybody's reading, or what your favorite books are about this too. But I mean, I think getting knowledge and not stopping, but continue to fill yourself up with knowledge. And then, of course, it doesn't matter unless you actually get off your chair and you're activated to do something. And I would always say, of course, you need to start a business, because I think business is the fastest way to make any change. We can't wait for government. We can't wait for our universities, which are all awesome, or whatever. I think business is a great thing to do. Of course, you're going to make a living, but you can make lots of change. And there are so many opportunities for food, because nobody knows what's going on with food anymore. People can't figure out what to cook at home in every community. And we grow food in Ohio. That's what we do. I mean, everybody talks about tech and bringing in all these things and doing what other cities are doing. I'm like, we're in the middle of flavor. Ohio grows flavor. We are a top 5 state for soil. We need to embrace that and take the reins and do that. Anyway, you can start a business, and you can do that right now.
That's great. Ben, do you want to add to that? Anything that you think the audience could do right now to get involved?
The simplest thing, if you have concern about local food, local economies, buy local food. It's really simple, and what we need in local food and at our farmers markets, we do not need fair weather patrons.
Come out when it's raining.
Come out when it's raining.
Come out when it's cold.
Come out when Comfest is going on. When the Buckeye we always find it's very interesting that there's this great thing in Columbus, the community festival, that is our lowest farmers market of the year by 25%. So vote with your dollars, buy food, learn about food, learn about farms. Agricultural literacy is at an all-time low. Maybe work on some farms, maybe work on a farm and decide you want to farm for a living.
And I would say too, from getting to know a lot of our local farmers, that they're very great mentors, have had open doors, open hearts, and some of them have wanted to retire and said that one person walked through their door that made them not want to retire because they just wanted to show them what they'd learned. And so, I think that if you are interested in that, there's a lot of resources we could connect you with. So go ahead, Warren. The one thought of what students could do today.
Michael, go ahead.
I was going in order, but go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I was just sitting here knowing I was going to have 5 or 6 minutes to prepare my answer. Warren was going next. I guess I would go back and visit where I started with you in terms of I think you have to go in there and find out what your passion is and then connect your passion to food or food system. Frankly, because there's so many different ways you can get involved. Certainly purchasing local food and voting with your dollar is one of the best and one of the easiest, because frankly it starts to make you think about where your food comes from. And for me, I know when I talk to audiences a lot and I ask that question of, when you sit down and you have a meal, how many of you think about where that food on your plate actually came from? And it's rare that I get that many hands up in a room. We've become so conditioned to just eating like machines. So I certainly think that's a simple thing. Starting a business is another great idea, because there's so much room right now in this food system work for entrepreneurs and thinkers, and it doesn't need to be a Fortune 500 company. There's some beautiful places to jump in given the needs. There's other simple things like grow some yourself. Maybe you're not going to become a farmer because that's not your passion, but you can certainly put some seeds in a pot and put them out in your windowsill right here on the university campus. That's a great way to get involved. Grow a garden, whatever it is. Learn to cook. I mean, I'm a chef, and I got to be honest with you. There's at least 2 generations or more, I don't know, of folks that don't even know how to cook anymore. I mentioned my 6.5-year-old daughter who's in school right now, and if I had my way, there would be 2 things that would be reinstituted at school. One of them is home ec, and the other is playground time and more of it. Because when you talk about that connection to obesity, diabetes, etc., I mean, those are easy ones for me. So again, so many different things that you could do, and they don't have to be save the world kind of things. Many of the simple gestures that you do when they're done collectively and consciously make such a huge difference.
So I'm a save the world kind of guy. So much as I love Michael, so I'd say real simple. This is an election year. How many of you are really pissed that we're the only representative democracy in the entire world that doesn't mandate GMO labeling of our food? So if you're pissed, you write to people that are asking for your vote and ask them what they're going to do for the next 2 years in office. If you want a democracy, the most powerful force in food in America today is our government. And they're controlled by Monsanto and God knows what else. If we don't take our government back, all of our local food efforts are lost. Take political power. And you can't do it by writing a check to somebody. You do it by grabbing your politician by the throat. And you can't grab Mitt or Barack by the throat. There are 15 people going to be elected from the state of Ohio, 15. And they're going to go to Congress in Washington, D.C. And they're the same people who allowed the Halliburton-Cheney exemption that exempted gas and oil exploration in America from any environmental regulation. They're the same people that allowed GMO labeling to go undone in this country. You ask them that question. You ask them and the people that are running against them, and you decide what you're going to do in the next 4 weeks. Get politically active right now, and get ready over the next 2 years to get your local leaders, your local food people, the people you care about, get them committed to go to Washington, D.C. And let's create a political movement in this country that refuses to elect anybody who takes money from big business and rich people. Let's get back to citizen finance campaigns in this country. We can never beat Monsanto with money. We have a democracy in this country, and when people are dying in the streets of Syria to have a fraction of what we have, and we're not using what we have, shame on us. We don't have GMO labeling in this country because we haven't taken it. Take it.
I think we're out of time. Are we out of time, Chris? Yeah. So I think that's a great. I was going to end with some Ohio and entrepreneurial trivia, but I feel like it's kind of a letdown after but I'm just going to end with it anyways because it's kind of fun. So anyways, I was researching references to entrepreneurs and food in Ohio in the early days, and here's some things I learned. That English travelers came to Ohio and wrote letters back to England referring to Ohio as Porkopolis. Our most famous early resident in 1801 was Johnny Appleseed, aka Johnny Chapman, a fine man that was referred to as the orchard evangelist. His business was to spread the delights of growing apple trees by seed to the new frontier. In 1800s, there are references to tomatoes, calling them love apples. And in 1842, in the great state of Ohio, champagne was made by accident by Nicholas Longworth, named affectionately Catawba wine. The connections between our land, our spirit, our traditions at the table, and the entrepreneurial pursuits have been firmly rooted in our state from the beginning. Let them continue. Everybody that came out tonight. Thank you, Chris.
Y'all bring out the best in us. Thank you.